This is our 1967 Shelby GT500 Eleanor, one of 44 built by Unique Performance. The engine that was in it was a 427 cubic inch, very big, very hot running engine. It had a supercharger on it and a nitrous system. But at the end of the day, it didn't really produce very much horsepower, and it was giving a lot of trouble because it had an old fuel injection system. Josh, can you explain a little about what that injection system was all about on the old engine?
The old injection system was just back from the early 2000s and didn't have the capabilities of what a modern system will have now with tuning and dialing things in. And the big thing was that this customer wants a reliable car, and trying to tune old technology to be reliable is just about impossible.
We had the car running. I drove it, had it going pretty fast, and we got it to quit overheating as bad as it was. But then it still wasn't running anywhere near what we would call to be a good running, reliable car where he could take it to a car show and get home. He seems to think it's a good idea. So we're working toward that. So Josh pulled the engine out of this, and Russ, what do we have left here?
Well, it looks like the next step is we have a full kit that's going to go in with a subframe. There's some cutting involved on our fairly new painted car, and a bunch of welding involved to put in some closeout panels. And then we also have old work in here where we had old hoses and wires and other things passing through the fender wall. So we're going to go ahead and close all that stuff out, and then we'll repaint the bay.
Normally on a car like this, we would take the fenders off and the nose off so that when we did all this cutting, we wouldn't be having the problem of having these fenders in the way. But this is all carbon fiber and various kinds of fiberglass, and this whole front is one big piece, and then it's actually fiberglassed down here on the rocker panels, so there's no gap, nowhere to break it. We can't just take this front end off. So we're going to have to do some very precise and careful cutting, because when this car first got here, we repainted it. We did an amazingly beautiful new paint job on the car, and now we're gonna have to work around that too. So the suspension system that we got for this car is gonna strengthen it up quite a bit. Why don't we walk over to the engine? We'll show you the old engine, and Josh can talk a bit about what is going in here.
This is the old 427. We had fueling issues that we could correct, and then they would happen again. So we kind of gave up on it, and with the supercharger and everything packed in that tiny engine bay, we could not get it to stay cool. If you were cruising on the highway, we couldn't get it to stay under 200 degrees. So once again, with the customer wanting to drive the car regularly, it was basically a show car that he's trying to drive regularly, if not daily. We couldn't keep a car that's running at over 200 degrees and call it reliable by any means. So that was the big reason for the change.
And all of this stuff is suspension components that are going in. These are plates that are going in that engine compartment because we're going to take off the shock towers in there. The new engine is really wide. We're going to reveal that new engine in a few minutes, but it's much wider than what this engine is. And this already occupied the whole space. There wasn't even room to get a wrench in there with that contraption. And then what do we have over here with, this is our new subframe, right?
That's the actual subframe. It's Detroit Speed's kit, so it's mostly a bolt-in kit with a lot of modifications to get it to bolt in.
Like things that you have to weld.
Yeah. This is the actual subframe piece, and it gets clamped around the factory rails, and then all their suspension bolts to that unit, along with, we get engine mounts through them that'll make our motor bolt in to this setup. And it comes with headers as well, which are over here to clear their whole subframe kit with the new motor.
And those are a beautiful piece of work, those headers. Those things are, you can see how tight they're put together so that this all fits in. I don't want to have to take them off after they're on, that's for sure. So anyway, these are some of the parts that are going into this project, and these big old engines create so much heat. They're iron block. So that engine block gets hot and it just radiates massive amounts of heat. And if you're driving on the western slope where this customer lives and it's 110 degrees or 100 degrees outside, and you're let's say you're in a parade or you're going slow with this car, this thing's not going to be able to cool off. And it already had a gigantic radiator in it. So what we're going to do is solve these problems by adding some modern technology. All right, let's get this engine opened up. Unbox it. This is the mighty Ford 5.2 liter illuminator. Naturally aspirated, incredibly cool, lightweight, almost 600 horsepower V8 engine that's going to go in the Shelby GT500. They use this engine in the Shelby GT350 track car. And it's a beast. It has a flat plane crank. And from my understanding, the sound of this engine is very, very unique. It revs to 7,800 RPM, almost 8,000 RPM. And that car has the exhaust pipes coming out right behind the front doors. So when the person drives this car and they step on the gas, they're going to get a sound that's going to be very, very incredible.
You know what you paid for.
Yeah, this is really nice looking in the front. And then in our traditional fashion, we like to make things look really nice. So we may do something like special aluminum polished valve covers. The customer wants various things engraved on them. This may end up with a polished part. So by the time we're done, this engine's going to look very custom, very special. So Josh, what do you think we have to go through to get this modern engine to work in that very analog car where there's nothing updated?
So basically where you start at is electronics. I end up building basically two separate harnesses. You have the harness in the car that's would normally be a factory harness. In this case, the car is so modified already that we'll be changing all of that as well. And then I build a separate harness for the engine and the controller. A lot of it comes down to routing and figuring out where we can cleanly run cables that doesn't make an engine bay look like a rat's nest. And then along with that too is cooling and AC lines that don't make the engine bay look like a rat's nest. So we'll spend a lot of time once the engine's in the engine bay laying out every single individual part so we can finally figure out where things need to be. The exhaust shouldn't be too complicated since we got headers that are built for this setup. And the other thing we'll have to do is build a custom air filter box and figure out where we can fit it in this tight little engine bay.
So what do we have to do with the air conditioner?
Air conditioning will be fairly straightforward because the kit is designed to fit under the dash. With the exception of running lines and the condenser, it's fairly straightforward.
But everything that's in there has to come out, right?
Correct, but it
got
already
an old
has
system
an
now.
aftermarket unit in it already, so that'll all come out.
Yeah, and I understand none of that'll fit with this system, so we're going to a completely new under dash unit. And then Russ, as far as the metal work to get this to all fit and bolt in.
Yeah, the objective there is, Josh is gonna get in there and put everything exactly where he wants it, and then when it goes over to the fabrication side, the The plan is to, hide everything as best we can to make it, look really professional, or add pieces that look, higher quality than, say, a plastic air intake or something like that. We can fabricate a custom box for it, probably out of aluminum, nice looking welds. It'll maybe get painted body color, or, something that makes it look, more finished and more professional. So, but once they decide where they want everything, then I go through and try to hide everything or make it look like it, belonged there from the start.
Sounds good. Well, we're excited to get this project underway, and I know the customer is, because shock of shocks, he has a deadline. He always has a deadline, and this deadline is April 1st, so we have a short time to get a whole lot of stuff done. So we're really glad the engine showed up, because that's kind of a critical component in all of this. So we're getting ready to get started like immediately. So you can follow us at farlandcars.com on the internet, and also on social media, Farland Classic Restoration, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. You'll be able to follow the progress of the car. When we get done, we'll be taking this car for a really fun ride.